In my previous life, on our wedding night, my wife announced that she wanted to sleep in separate rooms. Also, she could remain pure for her first love. After that, she resolutely flew abroad, determined to rekindle her old romance with him. Consumed by rage, I drove straight to the airport to chase after her, only to collide head-on with a dump truck on the way. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn, back on our wedding night. My wife was standing there, her face cold and distant, informing me, "George, I can't." But in the very next second, I cut her off. "Can't? If you can't, then why did I marry you? Let's get divorced. Don't waste my time." Chapter 1. The pain was like molten iron poured into my limbs, then violently torn away in an instant. My consciousness was yanked brutally out of the abyss of chaos and hurled back into reality. A sharp ringing screamed in my ears, nearly piercing my eardrums, while countless golden sparks exploded before my eyes and then rapidly went dark. My body felt unbearably heavy, as if filled with lead. Every shallow breath tugged at wounds that didn't exist, bringing with it a tearing, phantom agony. Yet there was no thick stench of blood or gasoline in my nose, only a faint trace of perfume, mingled with the scent of fabric. This smell was far too familiar, yet so distant it felt like something from a past life. I struggled to open my eyes. It took a moment for my vision to focus. Above me was a simple chandelier, its light soft and gentle. Beneath me was a bed covered with bright red wedding bedding, smooth and delicate to the touch. Everything in the room was so new it was almost blinding. The snow-white walls, the gleaming vanity, the lingering warmth of the day's wedding celebrations still hanging in the air, now smothered beneath a deliberate, icy silence. Wedding night. The realization struck like an ice-quenched spike, stabbing straight into my heart, the pain so sharp it nearly made me convulse. This wasn't a dream. The dump truck that had crushed me against the cold asphalt, the frantic drive toward the airport, that phone call from my secretary, Madam went to pick up that student of hers who's in country M. All the fragments of my past life, carrying towering hatred and bone-deep exhaustion, surged back all at once, threatening to drown me. "George?" A cool, calm female voice sounded beside me, tinged with a polite, formulaic detachment. I snapped my head to the side. Willow was standing a few steps away from the bed. She had changed out of the ornate red dress she wore during the wedding banquet and into a well-tailored, soft ivory silk pajama set. Her long hair fell smoothly over her shoulders, even without makeup. Her face was still strikingly beautiful, yet the eyes looking at me were like two pools of cold autumn water, so still, without the slightest ripple, clearly reflecting my pale face and the storm churning violently beneath my gaze. Those eyes, they were exactly the same as in my past life. During our 3 years of marriage, she had always looked at me this way, polite, proper, but separated by an unbreakable layer of ice, until the moment I thought the ice had finally melted, when I carefully prepared a table of dishes she loved, only to be met with her resolute figure rushing toward the airport in the dead of night. That phone call, that name, like a venomous snake, it instantly coiled around my throat. The hand at my side clenched tightly, my fingernails digging deep into my palm. I used the sharp, real pain to suppress the violence that was on the verge of erupting. Willow seemed not to notice the turmoil raging within me, or perhaps she was simply used to ignoring it. She turned slightly, avoiding my piercing stare, her voice steady, as if she were reading from an experimental report. "George, about our life going forward. I think we need to come to some agreements." Here it came. My heart sank into an icy abyss as that unforgettable scene from my previous life replayed with brutal clarity. I watched her perfectly shaped lips move, forming the cold verdict that had nailed me to the pillar of marital humiliation. She said, "For example, we can't share a bed. For now." Willow paused, as though carefully choosing more precise wording. Her gaze drifted past me into empty space. "For now, I can't accept it." "Hey." A soft, icy scoff slipped from my throat, laced with a mocking just as expected sarcasm. Interrupted. Willow instinctively looked up at me. For the first time, a ripple appeared in those deep, still eyes, a flash of surprise, as though she hadn't expected this reaction from me. "Now." I abruptly threw back the festive red quilt and swung myself out of bed in one clean motion. Tall and straight, I stood beside the bed, looking down at Willow, who was seated at its edge. An overwhelming sense of pressure instantly filled the newlywed room, as if even the air had frozen solid. Startled by my sudden movement and the icy aura radiating from me, Willow instinctively shrank back. A trace of panic and confusion flickered across her face. She parted her lips, as if trying to explain something. "George." I cut her off. "No need to explain." My voice was low and clear. Every word was like ice-hardened shards of glass, smashing into the silent air, and into Willow's heart. The corner of my mouth curved into a smile devoid of any warmth. My gaze was sharp as a blade, piercing straight into her eyes with a cruel, all-seeing clarity as I said, "Professor Liu." I deliberately emphasized the distant, formal title. I continued. In that case, perfect. I paused for 1 second, just long enough to clearly see the panic in Willow Lu's eyes explode outward, even tinged with a flash of disbelief and terror. I savored that subtle change, then spoke slowly, each word landing with decisive force. We're getting divorced. You can go to Country M to find your student, now, immediately, this instant. The final words were almost a roar, carrying every ounce of humiliation and fury from my past life, of betrayal and being trampled underfoot. That name, that place, the last straw that crushed me in my previous life, now transformed into the sharpest weapon, hurled straight back at her. She shook her head violently. No, that's not it. Willow sprang to her feet too abruptly, knocking over a delicate metal jewelry stand beside her. It clattered loudly to the floor, the sharp noise piercing the room. She didn't even notice. Her face drained white in an instant, as if the sudden accusation had terrified her out of her wits, or as if she had been seized by some overwhelming panic. Those eyes that were always so cool and composed were now trembling violently, rapidly flooding with deep red. Moisture gathered, as though they would overflow at any second. She reached out urgently, as if trying to grab my arm, her voice filled with unprecedented panic and a choking sob. George, listen to me, just now. What was it? I asked. I stepped back sharply, avoiding her outstretched hand. The movement was final, leaving no room for retreat. My eyes were icy to the bone, the mockery at my lips deepening. Was it a joke, I said, or is Professor Lu finally feeling generous enough to throw me a little marital obligation? I took a step closer, watching the light in Willow Lu's eyes shatter instantly, her body wavering as if on the verge of collapse. There wasn't a ripple in my heart, only a wasteland scorched by hatred and despair. Expressionless, I said. Too bad. I think it's filthy. The final word was light, almost casual, yet it carried crushing weight, completely obliterating whatever explanation Willow had been trying to piece together. Her hand froze in midair, fingers trembling slightly. All color drained from her face, leaving behind a deathly gray pallor. As if all her strength had been sucked out, she staggered back a step and slammed into the vanity behind her with a dull thud. I didn't look at her again. I turned and strode straight toward the walk-in closet. I pulled open the cabinet doors, didn't spare a glance at the brand new clothes inside, and precisely grabbed the few casual outfits I had brought with me. My movements were clean, efficient, without the slightest trace of reluctance. George. Willow's voice rang out behind me, broken with sobs and desperate pleading, like a drowning person futilely reaching for a piece of straw on the shore. Don't go. Please, listen to my explanation. It's not what you think. It really isn't. She stumbled as she tried to chase after me. I ignored her completely. I changed quickly, grabbed my phone and car keys, pulled open the door, and walked out without looking back. Bang. The heavy solid wood door slammed shut behind me with a thunderous crash, cutting off Willow's uncontrollable sobbing, and completely severing the last thread tying me to this absurd night. The sound-activated lights in the hallway flicked on from the noise, harsh white light spilling across the sharp lines of my profile and reflecting a bottomless, frozen abyss in my eyes. The world was finally quiet. Chapter 2. The heavy velvet curtains blocked out the faint morning light, sealing off not only the dawn but also any prying eyes from the outside world. Willow was curled up in the corner of the vast, icy wedding bed, like a dying bird. The room was deathly silent. Only her broken, intermittent sobs echoed weakly through the hollow luxury of the space, only to be quickly swallowed by the expensive soundproofing. Her eyes were swollen like overripe peaches, crisscrossed with alarming bloodshot veins. Her tears had long since dried up, leaving behind nothing but a burning, stabbing pain. Her mind felt like a tangled ball of yarn. The brutal scenes from her past life intertwined chaotically with George's icy, bone-chilling gaze from last night, and that sentence, too filthy, looping over and over in her head. The death certificate, that filthy rented apartment in a foreign country, the student who had once seemed gentle and refined, but who had later revealed a face as twisted as a demon's. The cold blade pressed against her throat, his beast-like roars. Those hellish scenes blended together with the final moment before her consciousness faded, the cold push notification on her phone's news feed. Renowned scholar Mr. George has tragically passed away last night after unsuccessful rescue efforts following a car accident. She had thought her rebirth was heaven's mercy, a second chance to make up for her mistakes, to tightly hold onto George's hand, to repay him tenfold for the warmth and love she owed him in her previous life, to live properly with him, have children, and make up for the child who was never born. She even remembered it clearly, last night, when she once again uttered those cruel words. The overwhelming panic and regret that surged through her heart. She had wanted to take them back immediately, to throw her arms around him, to tell him it was all a misunderstanding, but he knew. How did he know about Country M? How did he know about that student? That cold, all-seeing gaze, that undisguised hatred and revulsion. There was only one explanation. He had come back too. He had returned, carrying with him the hatred of a past life, of being pushed toward death by her own hands. The realization was like a red-hot branding iron, searing straight into the most fragile part of her heart, hurting so badly she could barely breathe. Overwhelming despair crashed down on her like an icy tide, swallowing her whole. She had lost him once already. Was she really going to lose him forever, completely, again? Right at the starting point of this reborn life. Knock, knock, knock. Clear, steady knocking suddenly shattered the silence. Like cold stones dropped into a deep pool, Willow jolted violently, springing upright like a startled rabbit. Her heart pounded wildly, nearly bursting out of her chest. George? Had he come back? Had he softened? That unrealistic hope, like a piece of driftwood clutched by a drowning person, instantly seized her heart. She scrambled out of bed almost on all fours, not even bothering to put on her slippers, bare feet staggering as she rushed toward the door. She yanked open the heavy door, looking out with a trace of desperate pleading. The person standing outside was not George. It was a stranger in a black suit, wearing gold-rimmed glasses, his expression meticulous and impassive. He held a thin document envelope in his hand. Ms. Willow. His voice was steady and emotionless, purely professional as he confirmed her identity. The faint glimmer of light that had just ignited in Willow's eyes was instantly extinguished, leaving behind only deeper, lifeless gray. She gripped the cold doorframe to barely keep her unsteady body from collapsing. The man spoke again. I am Mr. George Wang's legal representative. My surname is Chan. He inclined his head slightly, his tone devoid of warmth, as if reciting experimental data. Entrusted by Mr. Wang, I am here to formally deliver this divorce agreement. Mr. Wang's position is very clear. He hopes you will sign it as soon as possible. He extended the envelope marked divorce agreement with both hands, his movements precise and mechanical, like a pre-programmed machine. No, no. Willow stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake flicking its tongue. She shook her head violently and staggered backward, her voice hoarse and dry. I won't sign it. I won't sign. Where is George? Where is he? I want to see him. Chapter 3. She reached out, but not to take the documents. Instead, she tried to grab the lawyer's sleeve, like a helpless child clinging to the last thing in reach. Attorney Chan swiftly stepped back half a pace, neatly avoiding her touch. Behind the lenses of his glasses, his gaze was calm to the point of cruelty as he said, Ms. Liu, Mr. Wang does not wish to see you at this time. He has authorized me to handle this matter in full. Please read the agreement carefully. Mr. Wang has already signed it and has promised that your interests will be fully protected in the division of assets. He extended the document envelope toward her once more, the gesture carrying undeniable pressure. Mr. Wang hopes to receive your answer today. Protect my interests. Willow let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, as if she had just heard the most absurd joke in the world. In her swollen red eyes, pain and anger flared together. I don't need his money. I only want him. The rest of her words broke apart, choking in her throat, leaving behind only shattered breaths. Ms. Liu, please don't make this difficult for me. Attorney Chan's tone remained even, yet it carried an invisible weight. Mr. Wang's decision is extremely firm. If you refuse to sign, or attempt to delay, we will proceed with the next legal steps. He paused, then added pointedly, including, but not limited to, submitting certain aspects of your personal circumstances to your university's academic committee for necessary review. After all, relationships between faculty and students are a sensitive matter in academia, especially when they involve certain boundary-crossing private sentiments. Buzz. A wave of icy chill surged up from Willow's feet, instantly spreading through her entire body, as though her blood itself had frozen. She stared at the expressionless lawyer before her, at the utterly emotionless eyes behind those lenses. A threat. This was a naked, undisguised threat, using the academic reputation she valued as her life, using the honor of her mentor and her institution to threaten her. George, he had actually gone this far, just to get rid of her. He was willing to resort to methods like this. The George of her past life, no matter how coldly she treated him for 10 years, had never used such despicable tactics. He had always been upright, proud, and open, but now, Willow's heart felt as if it were being clenched violently by an invisible hand. The pain so intense it nearly suffocated her. It was her. She was the one who had personally forced that proud gentleman into this cold, ruthless version of himself. You. Willow trembled from head to toe, her teeth chattering, whether from rage or bone-deep cold. She couldn't tell. She looked at the document envelope being held out before her. The words divorce agreement burned into her eyes like red-hot branding irons. The lawyer said nothing more, simply maintaining his posture, holding out the documents, like a silent statue carrying out orders. Time ticked by in the deadlocked silence. Every second felt like a blade performing a slow execution, slicing away at what little Willow had left. No one knew how long it was, perhaps only a few minutes, yet it stretched on like an entire century. At last, The final trace of struggle in Willow's eyes went out completely, leaving behind nothing but boundless despair and ash-gray emptiness. Her hand trembled as she reached forward. Her fingertips were ice-cold as she slowly, so slowly it felt as if they weighed 1,000 pounds, took the thin document envelope. Fine. A single word, draining all the strength from her body. Hoarse and barely recognizable. She didn't even dare look at the lawyer again. She turned abruptly and slammed the door shut with a loud bang, sealing off that cold executor, and everything outside, with it. Her body slid down along the icy door panel until she collapsed onto the carpet. She clutched the envelope tightly, her knuckles turning white from the force. Tears finally surged out once more, silently soaking into the expensive cashmere carpet. She had lost, on the very first day of her rebirth. In the face of George's icy hatred and thunderous methods, she lost completely. In her previous life, she had pushed him away with her own hands and run toward hell. In this life, before she even had the chance to draw close, she was pushed by his own hands into an even deeper abyss. Chapter 4. National Institute of Nanomaterials. A 3-experimental building. Top floor. Beyond the massive circular floor-to-ceiling windows, the afternoon sun poured in generously, bathing the spacious director's office in a warm, golden glow. The air carried the low, steady hum unique to operating instruments, mixed with the faint, clean scent of chemical reagents. I stood by the window, my back to the door. I was dressed in a spotless white lab coat, posture straight as a pine. My gaze rested on the dense cluster of research buildings in the distance, yet my eyes were unfocused, as if piercing through the scene before me and settling on some unreachable place far away. Sunlight traced the sharp contours of my profile, cold, hard lines that radiated an unmistakable sense of distance. Boss. A male voice, tinged with teasing, shattered the quiet. My assistant, David, was leaning casually against my desk, which was piled high with papers, literature, and project reports. He held a half-eaten apple in his hand, his face glowing with barely concealed curiosity and gossip. Stop pretending to be all deep and mysterious. Come on, confess. David took another bite of the apple and continued, his words muffled. What's going on between you and Professor Liu? Exactly. It's only been how long? 3 days. Married for 3 days and already divorced. Your efficiency beats even our group's optimized reaction rates. He clicked his tongue in amazement, eyes full of probing interest. Professor Liu is amazing, beautiful, top tier academically, incredible presence. She's the goddess in so many people's hearts. This is just such a waste. I turned around slowly, my expression unreadable. The sunlight fell into my dark eyes, yet reflected not the slightest warmth. I glanced at David calmly. The look was flat and still, but David's apple chewing froze mid-motion as an inexplicable chill crept up his spine. I smiled. Amazing. The corner of my mouth lifted by the barest fraction, forming a fleeting curve, so brief it could almost be mistaken for an illusion, carrying a trace of indescribable mockery. I didn't answer David's question. Instead, I reached out, picked up a thick project progress report from the desk, and flipped through it casually, the pages rustling softly. Personal matters, I said. Let's not talk about it. My voice was low and steady, devoid of emotion. Then I asked, the molecular beam epitaxy parameter optimization I asked you to follow up on last week, are the results out yet? Almost. David was caught off guard by the abrupt shift in topic. He quickly swallowed his apple and answered awkwardly. He knew this meant I didn't want to discuss it further. Though curiosity clawed at him, he didn't dare press on. Boss's aura today was cold enough to freeze someone solid. 3 o'clock this afternoon, I said. B2 electron microscopy lab. I want the full analysis report. I closed the file in my hands. My tone brooked no argument. My gaze had already returned to the view outside the window, as if the conversation had never happened. Yes, sir. Guaranteed completion of the task. David immediately straightened, snapped a rather sloppy salute, grabbed his things from the desk, and wisely slipped out of the office. As the door closed, he could still feel the lingering oppressive atmosphere inside. I remained standing by the window, my solitary figure stretched long by the sunlight. The office was left with nothing but the low hum of instruments and the faint sound of my own breathing. The hand hanging at my side curled slightly, unconsciously. David's words, Professor Liu is amazing, were like a tiny thorn, pricking a place in my heart that I had long since numbed, bringing with it a dull, delayed ache. Amazing. Yes, to outsiders, she was perfect, a perfect scholar, the image of a perfect wife. Only I knew the cold core beneath that flawless exterior, and that heart which had never belonged to me. Chapter 5. For 3 years in my past life, I had been like a devout believer, worshipping an ice sculpture that would never melt. I closed my eyes, and images flashed before me, her deathly pale face last night, her reddened eyes, and that desperate cry, listen to my explanation. Explanation. My lips pressed into a cold, rigid line. What was there left to explain? At the end of that airport road in my previous life, the dump truck that came roaring toward me, that was the final explanation she had given. Just then, a light knock sounded at the office door. I opened my eyes. All emotion vanished instantly, replaced by my usual calm. "Come in." The door opened a crack. A young female researcher peeked in, her face tense with unease. "Professor Wong." "Professor Liu is here," she said. "She's downstairs in the reception lounge. She says she wants to see you." Willow. Her name was like a stone dropped into a still lake, sending a ripple of icy waves through my heart. My brow tightened almost imperceptibly, then relaxed again. My expression remained unchanged, my voice flat and emotionless. "Tell her I'm busy. I don't have time." "But," the young researcher hesitated. "Professor Liu said she can wait." She added carefully, "She'll wait until you're free." I turned and walked back to my desk, picked up a new file, and opened it. My eyes settled on the page, focused and distant. My tone was indifferent, without the slightest ripple. "Then let her wait." The young researcher looked at my cold profile, didn't dare say another word, withdrew her head, and gently closed the door. Silence fell over the office once more. My gaze rested on the document, yet not a single word of the dense data registered in my mind. I could picture it clearly, the reception lounge downstairs, and what Willow must look like sitting there, anxious, regretful, or clinging to that stubborn persistence she always had. Whatever it was, it no longer had anything to do with me. I picked up the internal phone on my desk and dialed the lab extension. "Tom," I said, "bring me the literature review you compiled last time on interface defects in superconducting thin films." Work. Only cold data and clearly defined goals could fill the vast emptiness left behind after betrayal hollowed me out. Only they could suppress that ripple in my heart that should no longer exist. The one named Willow. The reception lounge on the ground floor of the Institute's main building was spacious and bright. Yet it was permeated by a lingering mix of new furniture and disinfectant, a smell that refused to fade. Chapter 6. The afternoon sunlight slanted in through the windows, casting long lattice-shaped shadows across the polished marble floor. Tiny motes of dust drifted in the air. Willow sat alone on the wide, cold leather sofa. Her back was perfectly straight, but her hands were tightly clasped together on her lap, her knuckles pale from the force. She had changed out of yesterday's silk pajamas and into a well-fitted ash-gray business suit. Her long hair was meticulously pinned up, and her makeup had been carefully applied, trying to conceal the lingering redness and weariness that refused to fully fade. Yet deep within her eyes, the exhaustion and lingering panic hung like a thin veil that could not be wiped away. From morning until now, she had been sitting here for a full 3 hours. "I'm sorry, Professor Liu. Professor Wong is still in a meeting." "Professor Liu." Professor Wong was just called away by the vice director. "I'm afraid he won't be back anytime soon." "Professor Liu." Perhaps you could make another appointment another day." The front desk staff and passing employees had gone from polite attentiveness to visible discomfort, and finally to deliberate avoidance. Each response was like a small hammer, lightly tapping against her tightly stretched nerves. She could clearly feel the gazes cast in her direction, curious, probing, and even carrying a trace of barely concealed pity. It made her feel as though she were sitting on pins and needles. Yet she could not leave. She had to see him. She had to. Even if it was only for 1 minute. She needed to tell him she knew she was wrong. She knew who she had truly wanted to hold onto at the very end of her past life. She wasn't going to Country M to look for that scumbag. She had been deceived. She had come back because she wanted to live properly with him. Countless words churned and collided in her heart, yet found no way out. With every closed door, those words grew paler and more powerless. George's attitude was already unmistakably clear: rejection. Absolute rejection. He couldn't even be bothered to grant her a chance to explain face to face. The man who had once been gentle and accommodating toward her seemed as though he had never existed at all. Time crawled by in this agonizing wait, every second stretching out like an entire century. Just as Willow was on the verge of being pushed to the edge of collapse by this silent torture, the door to the reception lounge was gently pushed open. It wasn't George, it was a young woman. She looked to be around 25 or 26, wearing the Institute's standard white lab coat, clearly tailored with care to accentuate her slender figure. Her jet black hair was tied into a neat, high ponytail, revealing a smooth, full forehead and a strikingly bright, vivid face. Her eyes were large, her irises a beautiful amber color. At this moment, they were slightly widened, filled with undisguised surprise and curiosity as they looked straight at Willow. The girl was holding a thick stack of printed research papers, the topmost appearing to be a bound report. Her gaze lingered on Willow's face for a few seconds, carrying a pure, untainted sense of admiration and scrutiny. "Are you Professor Willow?" she asked. Her voice was crisp and pleasant, brimming with the vitality unique to youth. Willow felt a little uncomfortable under her gaze. She straightened her back instinctively, maintaining the composure befitting Professor Liu, and gave a slight nod. I am. And you are? Oh, hello, Professor Lu. The girl seemed to realize herself all at once. A radiant smile immediately bloomed across her face, revealing 2 small canine teeth that made her look especially youthful and energetic. Cradling the documents, she walked in quickly and gave a slight bow, her respect perfectly measured. My name is Anna. I'm a postdoc who just joined Professor Wang's research group. I've admired you for a long time. I've read your papers on transport properties of topological insulators so many times, they're absolute masterpieces. Her tone was filled with sincere admiration and enthusiasm. Dr. Anna. Hello. Willow Lu forced a polite smile and nodded. The name Anna flickered through her mind, carrying a faint sense of inexplicable familiarity, but her thoughts were in too much chaos for her to dwell on it. The admiration and warmth in the other woman's eyes felt, to Willow at this moment, more like an invisible form of mockery. Look, the once untouchable Professor Lu, who had stood on a pedestal, was now sitting here like an abandoned woman, humbly waiting for a man who refused to see her. Chapter 7. Anna asked, Professor Lu, are you waiting for Professor Wang? Her gaze flicked over the empty table in front of Willow. No one had even brought her a glass of water. Then she glanced at Willow's slightly stiff expression. A flash of understanding passed quickly through those beautiful amber eyes, instantly replaced by an even brighter smile. He just finished a meeting and went back to his office, Anna said. But, she blinked playfully, lowered her voice a little, and leaned in with the intimacy of sharing a secret. He just asked me to bring him this review report on decoherence mechanisms in superconducting qubits. And, well, he seemed to be in a pretty good mood. Willow's heart jolted violently. He was back in his office, and in a good mood. A tiny, unrealistic spark of hope ignited instantly in the depths of her frozen heart. Maybe Anna's appearance was a turning point. Maybe George would be willing, at least with a newcomer present, to give her a chance to speak. Even if it was just a few minutes. Really? She asked. Willow's voice tightened with nerves as she subconsciously stood up. Then could I trouble you two? She wanted to ask if Anna could help notify him, or even take her upstairs. Oh, Professor Lu, don't worry. Anna laughed, clearly seeing through her intention, and cut in at once, her smile dazzling. Just sit and wait for a bit. Professor Wang is up on A3. I'll take the report up right now, and while I'm at it, I'll check the situation for you. If he's really in a good mood, I'll put in a word for you. Holding the stack of documents, she tilted her head playfully, her eyes clear and bright, carrying a touch of friendly mischief. Thank you so much, Dr. Anna. Willow felt as though she had grabbed onto a lifeline. She thanked her hurriedly, genuine gratitude shining in her eyes. This warm, lively young woman was, at this moment, nothing less than a beam of light cutting through the darkness. No problem. Just call me Anna. Anna laughed cheerfully, turned with the documents in her arms, and her ponytail traced a lively arc through the air. Wait for my update, Professor Lu. She left the reception lounge with light footsteps, the door closing softly behind her. Willow sat back down on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly together, her heart pounding from a mix of anticipation and nervousness. She looked in the direction Anna had disappeared, silently praying. Maybe, just maybe, this girl really could bring a turning point. Chapter 8. Time grew unbearably viscous in the waiting. Willow's gaze drifted involuntarily toward the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the reception lounge. The sunlight was perfect. The institute's central garden was lush and green, a few figures hurrying past along the paths. Suddenly, her eyes froze. At the exit of the laboratory building diagonally across from her, a tall figure she knew down to her bones stepped outside. It was George. He was still wearing his white lab coat, his posture straight as a pine. He had turned his head slightly, as if listening to the person beside him speak. Sunlight fell across the sharp lines of his profile, outlining them with a faint golden rim. And walking right beside him was Anna, who had left only a short while ago. Anna tilted her head up slightly as she looked at George, her face lit with a brilliantly radiant smile. Her amber eyes sparkled, as if filled with shattered sunlight. She was speaking animatedly, her hands gesturing from time to time, youthful energy spilling out of her with every movement. George didn't seem to be wearing any particular expression, yet Willow caught it instantly, the way he inclined his ear to listen, and the line of his tightly pressed lips that appeared, just barely, more relaxed than usual. Their strides were perfectly in sync as they headed toward the institute's main gate. Anna's laughter seemed to drift faintly through the glass, crisp and bright. They were standing so close that the ends of Anna's hair looked as though they were about to brush against George's arm. The scene was painfully harmonious. A wave of icy chill surged up from Willow's feet, shooting straight to the crown of her head. The fragile spark of hope she had just reignited was completely extinguished by the sight before her, without even a wisp of smoke left behind. In its place, a foreign, sharp emotion erupted and spread wildly like poisonous vines. Jealousy. It stabbed into her heart like countless tiny poisoned needles, sour, aching, painful, so intense she could barely breathe. When George was with her, he was always distant, polite, separated by an invisible barrier. When had he ever looked this relaxed, this calm? Toward Anna, could it be that a tidal wave of terror crashed over her, cold and suffocating? She sprang to her feet, her body trembling slightly with agitation and rage. No, she couldn't just stand by and watch this happen. She had to ask. She had to make things clear. Throwing aside all composure and restraint, she stumbled out of the reception lounge and chased after the two figures disappearing in that direction. Chapter 9. On the tree-lined path outside the institute gates, shadows of leaves swayed gently. Anna and I were just ahead. George! Willow shouted with all her strength. Her voice, sharp from urgency, carried a tremor she herself didn't realize. The two of us in front stopped at the same time. I turned around slowly. There was no surprise on my face, only a deep, unfathomable calm, like an ancient well without a ripple. Sunlight filtered through the gaps between the leaves, casting mottled shadows across my face, making my gaze seem even darker and more inscrutable. Anna turned around as well. The smile on her face faded slightly. In her beautiful amber eyes flickered a perfectly measured trace of surprise and confusion. She looked at Willow, then at me, and wisely chose not to speak. Willow hurried over to us. From running in agitation, her chest rose and fell violently. She forced herself not to look at the youthful, eye-catching Anna beside me. Her gaze locked onto my face, her voice rough and hoarse from suppressing the emotions churning inside her. George, let's talk. Her eyes were filled with pleading, pain, and a madness scorched by jealousy. Just 5 minutes, no, 3 minutes. Give me 3 minutes. I looked at her quietly, at the pain surging in her eyes and the jealousy she couldn't hide. My expression remained calm and unmoved. After a few seconds of silence, just as Willow thought I would reject her again without mercy, I spoke at last. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut cleanly through the breeze rustling the leaves. Talk about what? I paused slightly, my gaze sweeping over her clenched fists and trembling body. The corner of my mouth lifted into an extremely faint curve, carrying a cruelty born of seeing through everything, and undisguised contempt. Talk about the student you've never been able to let go of. Or talk about. My eyes brushed lightly over Anna, who stood quietly to the side. Before returning to Willow's ashen face, I spoke each word slowly and clearly, like ice-hardened nails being driven straight into her eardrums and her heart. I have a bit of a psychological cleanliness issue. I really can't accept my wife's heart always being occupied by another man, especially when that man is her own student. The words fell. The forest path was left with nothing but the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. Willow froze as if struck by an invisible bolt of lightning. In that instant, all the blood in her body seemed to rush to her head, then freeze solid in the next second. The color drained completely from her face, leaving only a deathly gray pallor. Those eyes that were always so cool were now opened wide, her pupils contracting violently from sheer shock and terror, reflecting George's cold, all-seeing face. He knew. He really knew. Not only did he know about that student, he even knew her most hidden, most unspeakable secret. He knew her heart belonged to someone else. He really had been reborn too. That realization was like a red-hot dagger plunged straight into her heart, instantly shredding every last trace of hope, expectation, and struggle into pieces. The secret she had hidden until death in her past life, the filthy, shameful corner buried deep within her soul, which she thought George would never discover, had, all along, been completely transparent in his eyes. Chapter 10. The impact was so overwhelming that her vision went black in waves. Her body swayed uncontrollably, nearly unable to stay upright. She looked at me, her lips trembling violently, yet not a single word came out. Explain. Defend herself. Under his cold, all-seeing gaze, any words would have been laughably pale, filthy, even. George, Anna, standing nearby, also seemed stunned by this sudden, gunpowder-filled exchange. She instinctively spoke up softly, her voice carrying a hint of uncertainty and concern. But I no longer spared Willow another glance, as though she were nothing more than an insignificant obstacle. I tilted my head slightly and spoke to Anna. My tone returned to its former steadiness. There was even a trace of warmth, barely perceptible. Let's go, Anna. Didn't you say our reservation at that new restaurant is almost time? Oh, right. Anna snapped back to her senses at once, nodding quickly. The surprise on her face was swiftly replaced by a kind of flattered delight. I stepped forward and walked straight past Willow, who stood frozen like a statue, stirring a faint rush of air as I passed. Anna hurried after me. As she went by Willow, her steps paused ever so slightly. Those beautiful amber eyes flicked toward Willow in a quick glance. That look was extraordinarily complex. There was sympathy, curiosity, but more than anything else, a sense of finality, as if the dust had settled, and faintly, almost imperceptibly, the pity of a victor. The gaze touched Willow only briefly, like a feather brushing past, yet it carried crushing weight. leaving Willow with a profound sense of being stripped bare, exposed under the harsh light of day. The two figures walking away side by side formed a picture of perfect harmony under the afternoon sun. Like a carefully composed painting, Willow stood alone where she was, like a plant completely withered after being ravaged by a violent storm. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the leaves, casting mottled shadows over her body. Yet it could not dispel the bone-deep cold and despair that enveloped her. George's final words, each and every one, were like ice cones tipped with poison, piercing her mind over and over again. Psychological cleanliness. A heart occupied by another man. Her student. He knew everything. He had returned, bearing all the hatred of his past life and the ruthlessness of this one. And she, at the very starting point of rebirth, in that icy room last night, had already been pushed off a cliff by his own hands, without the slightest chance of redemption. The key slid into the lock. The soft click as it turned echoed sharply in the deathly silent entryway. She pushed the door open, and what greeted her was a suffocating emptiness and cold. George's presence had long since vanished without a trace. All that remained were expensive furnishings and decor, exuding the lifeless scent of brand new things untouched by warmth. Sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting stark white patches across the floor, deepening the loneliness. She staggered into the center of the living room. Above her hung a massive crystal chandelier, refracting icy light that stabbed painfully into her eyes. The last shred of strength seemed to be completely drained from her body. She could no longer hold herself up and sank weakly to her knees on the cold, smooth marble floor. The dull pain of her knees hitting the ground was not even a fraction of the tearing agony in her chest. A sob, suppressed to the extreme, like the whimper of a wounded beast, finally tore free from her throat. She clamped a hand tightly over her mouth. Her body shook violently as she curled into herself, as if that could ward off the all-pervasive cold and despair. Tears surged out, scalding as they smashed onto the icy floor, instantly blooming into dark, spreading stains. The agony of dying in her previous life, the terror of that foreign rental apartment, the utter devastation when she learned of George's death, all the pain and regret burst forth like a collapsed dam. They collided violently with George's cold gaze after rebirth, his words of disgust, and the harmonious image of him walking away beside Anna, assaulting her already fragile sanity. Why, after getting another chance, did it end like this? She only wanted to make amends, to hold on to the men she had wronged all the way to his death. She hadn't even had the chance to tell him that, in her final moment, the only person in her heart was him. Only George, the George who, on that cold, rainy night, had left a light on for her and cooked a whole table of dishes she loved. Overwhelming grievance and pain clawed at her insides like countless hands tearing her apart. She could no longer restrain herself. She broke down in loud sobs, her hoarse, despairing cries echoing through the vast, luxurious space, piercingly lonely and desolate. She pounded her fists against the cold, hard floor. Her knuckles quickly swelled and split, blood seeping out in tiny streaks, yet she felt no pain at all. The only sensation was in her chest, where it felt as though a large piece of her heart had been brutally carved away, leaving behind a hollow void filled with bone-chilling wind. Chapter 11. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in the small courtyard of an old Western-style house hidden beneath dense plane trees, the scene was entirely different. On a summer evening, the fading glow of the sunset coated the vine-covered red brick walls in a warm shade of gold. The courtyard was lush with flowers and greenery. Several tall pomegranate trees were heavy with unripe fruit, their branches weighed down. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of gardenias, mingled with the inviting aroma of home-cooked dishes drifting out from the kitchen. Come on, George, don't be shy, try this. Professor Charles, his hair already gray yet his spirit vigorous, wore a broad, heartfelt smile that he couldn't suppress. He personally picked up a large piece of glossy, braised pork rib and, without giving me a chance to refuse, plopped it into my bowl with such enthusiasm that it nearly tipped over. Dad, slow down. Anna, sitting beside me, protested with a soft scold. She quickly reached out to steady my bowl, a helpless yet sweet smile on her face, her cheeks faintly flushed. She had changed out of her lab coat and was now wearing a light yellow floral dress. Her jet black ponytail had been loosened, cascading smoothly over her shoulders, lending her an added softness and brightness. I hurriedly thanked him. Thank you, Professor Sue. I looked at the small mountain of food in my bowl, then at Anna's concerned glance. The tension that had been coiled tight for days seemed to ease unconsciously in this warm, everyday atmosphere filled with human warmth. This familiar setting, Professor Sue's hearty laughter, and the faint, sun-like warmth emanating from Anna were like a gentle balm, temporarily dispersing the gloom Willow had cast over my heart. Anna's father waved his hand dismissively. Thank me for what? He poured himself another full glass of the top-grade matai I had brought, his face glowing red. You kid, back in the lab. I already told you, doing research requires patience. And choosing a partner requires even sharper eyes, but you just dove straight in, and no one could pull you back out. He pointed at me, his tone carrying both teasing from experience and a barely concealed trace of concern. And now, you've hit the wall, finally know to turn back. Ah. Dad, say less. Anna nudged my arm lightly, a little embarrassed, softly trying to defuse the situation. I raised my glass toward Charles, my expression calm, even carrying a faint but genuine curve at the corner of my lips. You taught me well, Professor. Back then, I was foolish and made you worry. Ha, that's more like it. Charles downed his drink in one go, exhaled contentedly, then looked back and forth between Anna and me. The more he looked, the more satisfied he became, his smile nearly overflowing. Now though, hey, I think this is great, really great. After all the twists and turns, what's meant to be always finds its way back. His gaze lingered meaningfully on his daughter. Anna's face grew even redder. She lowered her head shyly, taking small bites of her food, long lashes fluttering like butterfly wings. Watching her like this, I was reminded of her lively, clever glance earlier that afternoon when she had helped me out at the institute gates. Somewhere deep inside me, a corner long sealed in ice seemed to loosen, just a little. The feeling was unfamiliar, carrying a long-lost, comforting warmth. I lifted my glass and gestured lightly toward Anna, my voice gentle. About today, thank you, Anna. Anna looked up. Her amber eyes sparkled as if stars had fallen into them. She shook her head vigorously, her smile bright. Professor Wang, you're too polite. Being able to help you, I'm really happy. She lifted her glass of juice and lightly clinked it against mine. Seeing the easy warmth and unspoken understanding flowing naturally between us, Charles was delighted beyond measure. He added another helping to my bowl and said cheerfully, eat more. From now on, just treat this place like your own home. Don't stand on ceremony. Under the warm glow of the lights, the aroma of food filled the air. The old man's laughter rang out freely, and the girl's smile was radiant. Sitting there, immersed in this long-absent warmth of everyday life, it felt as though the coldness and betrayal of my past life had become a distant, blurred nightmare. Perhaps this solid, tangible warmth was what I should truly hold on to. Chapter 12. Over the next 2 days, Willow seemed to vanish completely from my world. No phone calls, no messages. She didn't appear downstairs at the institute either. The signed divorce agreement was efficiently delivered to the Civil Affairs Bureau by Attorney Chan the very next day. Once the cooling-off period ended, that red certificate would formally and irrevocably declare the end of our relationship. My life returned to a high-intensity, tightly regulated research rhythm. At the top floor of the A3 experimental building of the National Institute of Nanomaterials, that office with its sweeping view became my fortress. I buried myself deep in mountains of papers, data, and project reports, filling every second with parameters precise to several decimal places and experimental procedures that demanded absolute concentration. Only this way could I completely suppress those turbulent emotions that belonged to the past. However, the calm lasted only 2 days. On the morning of the third day, I was standing in front of a massive electron microscope, observing atomic-scale images of an ultra-thin material interface. On the screen, colored points representing different atoms formed intricate, orderly patterns, like a miniature star map of the universe. I was fully focused, trying to identify the critical defect that might affect device performance. Professor Wang. My assistant David's voice came from the doorway, carrying a trace of barely concealed tension. My eyes didn't leave the screen. I merely hummed in acknowledgement. He continued, Professor Liu. David hesitated, carefully watching my expression. She's here again. Downstairs. She says she wants to see you. My hand on the control joystick paused slightly. Tell her I'm conducting an experiment. I don't have time, I said. My voice was perfectly flat, as though I were stating a fact that had nothing to do with me. I adjusted the focus again, trying to confirm the offset point, but David lowered his voice further, sounding troubled. Professor Liu. This time she didn't wait in the reception lounge. She's standing in the lobby of our A3 building. She's been standing there for almost an hour now. People are coming and going. Lots of them have seen her. My brow furrowed more deeply. I shut down the microscope's imaging system, straightened up, and turned to look at David. The lab's cold white lighting fell across my face, carving out sharp, unyielding lines. Then let her stand, I said. My tone remained calm, yet carried an undeniable chill. How long she chooses to wait is her own business. Don't disrupt the experimental schedule. David was intimidated by the coldness in my gaze. He didn't dare say anything more, quickly replied yes, and retreated from the lab at once. I turned my attention back to the now dark screen. Yet Willow's figure surfaced uncontrollably in my mind, standing in a crowded lobby. Like what? Like a discarded woman waiting for charity. An inexplicable irritation quietly took root. What exactly was she trying to do? Was she trying to win sympathy with this kind of humiliating display? Or did she think this would shake my resolve? Ridiculous. I forced myself to refocus and restarted the microscope, but the precisely arranged atomic light points on the screen now seemed to carry Willow's eyes instead, eyes shimmering with moisture, filled with pain and pleading. I took a deep breath, suppressing the agitation surging in my chest. Chapter 13. At 2 in the afternoon. I needed to go to the Precision Instrument Center in Building B1 to coordinate the calibration schedule for an imported piece of equipment. I picked up the folder on my desk and walked out of my office. The elevator descended. The doors opened onto the first-floor lobby. A surge of noise rushed into my ears. It was the peak time right after lunch break, when researchers were returning to their respective posts in small groups. The lobby was crowded with people moving briskly in every direction. And right at the center of this busy scene, not far from the revolving door entrance, stood a figure in a plain off-white dress. Willow. She stood perfectly straight, her back stiff with tension, her head slightly lowered. Her hands were folded together in front of her. Her jet-black hair fell loose, covering most of her face. Around her, people streamed past without pause. The looks cast in her direction carried curiosity, scrutiny, confusion, some even tinged with the faint amusement of onlookers watching a spectacle. She was like a jagged reef in a surging river, enduring the invisible force of the current, yet stubbornly refusing to move even an inch. Sunlight poured down through the vast glass dome above, casting bright patches of light onto her body. Yet it did nothing to dispel the aura of isolation, sorrow, and lingering desolation that clung to her. She seemed wrapped in a thick, invisible layer of grief, completely out of place amid the surrounding bustle and vitality. My steps halted at the elevator entrance. From a distance, I looked at her coldly, as if sensing my gaze. Willow suddenly lifted her head. Our eyes met. Her face was pale to the point of translucence. Her eyes were filled with exhaustion and despair so thick it was almost tangible, shot through with frightening red veins. And yet, the instant she saw me, that lifeless gaze suddenly ignited with a faint but stubborn spark, like a drowning person finally catching sight of the shore. She instinctively took a step forward. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to call my name, but the surrounding noise and the countless eyes watching her were like invisible shackles. She froze in place, a flicker of embarrassment and shame crossing her face. All she could do was bite down hard on her lower lip, staring at me without blinking, almost greedily, with eyes brimming with unspoken words, pain and pleading tightly intertwined. That gaze seemed to carry heat, piercing through the crowd and nailing itself straight onto me. Something struck my heart, not hard, but not lightly either. The pain in her eyes was so real, so intense, it felt as though it might spill over at any moment. For a split second, images from my past life surged back uncontrollably, her figure rushing toward the airport late at night, the blinding headlights of the dump truck, and the secretary's voice on that final phone call. But in the very next moment, clearer images overrode them all. Her deathly pale face last night, that cold declaration of no sharing a bed, and the words that pierced straight through everything, psychological cleanliness. Any lingering softness froze instantly, replaced by deeper coldness and revulsion. I looked away. I didn't look at her again. My face showed no expression at all, as if the person standing there were nothing more than an irrelevant stranger. I stepped forward and walked straight toward the revolving door, my stride steady, without the slightest hesitation. George. At last, Willow couldn't hold back. She called out, her voice trembling, soft, yet carrying a heart-rending fragility that cut straight through the surrounding noise. My steps did not slow in the slightest. I didn't even alter my pace. I pushed open the heavy revolving door and disappeared into the sunlight outside, never looking back. Willow watched helplessly as I left without hesitation. The revolving door turned slowly shut, cutting off the bright world beyond, and completely severing the sight of my indifferent back. The faint spark that had just ignited in her eyes flickered like a dying candle in the wind, then went out completely. Overwhelming despair crashed down on her like an icy tide. She could no longer hold herself up. Her body swayed under the gaze of countless complex, unreadable eyes around her. She staggered back a step and collapsed weakly against the cold, mirror-smooth marble wall. She closed her eyes. Burning tears finally broke through the last barrier and streamed down silently, sliding along her pale cheeks and splashing onto the polished floor. Low murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people shook their heads and sighed. Others passed by without a glance. She was like a forgotten island, collapsing soundlessly at the very center of the bustling crowd. Chapter 14. Willow. What on earth is wrong with you? The moment Willow used the last of her strength to push the front door open, her mother's sharp, tear-choked accusation came crashing down on her. The living room was brightly lit, yet the heavy, suffocating atmosphere hanging in the air remained untouched by the light. Justin Liu sat grim-faced on the main sofa, a cigarette pinched between his fingers. Smoke curled upward, blurring the deep furrow between his brows. Willow's mother stood beside the sofa. Her well-maintained face was now filled with anxiety, anger, and sheer disbelief. Willow felt a splitting headache. Every bone in her body seemed to have come loose. The agonizing hour she had spent standing in the institute lobby, George's final, resolute silhouette, and the surrounding gazes, curious, sympathetic, voyeuristic, all the exhaustion and humiliation surged to their breaking point at this moment. She had no strength left to speak, no strength even to look at her parents' faces. She silently bent down to change her shoes, her movements slow and mechanical, like a marionette with its strings pulled taut. "Stop right there." Her mother rushed over in a few quick steps and grabbed Willow's arm. The grip was shockingly strong, her nails almost digging into flesh. "Say something." "What, are you mute now? A perfectly good marriage. How many days was it?" 3 days. 3 days and you got divorced. Where are we supposed to put our faces? What will the Wang family think of us? Do you have any idea how ugly the rumors outside have become? The more she spoke, the more agitated she grew, her voice rising and trembling with tears. What's wrong with George? His family background, his character, his abilities, everything is top tier. What more do you want? Huh? The pain in her arm made Willow frown slightly. She lifted her head and looked at her mother's face, twisted with anger, and at her father's silent yet oppressive gaze. A massive sense of absurdity and helplessness washed over her. What they cared about was face, public opinion, their relationship with the Wang family. Who had ever truly cared about the pain in her heart? Mom. She opened her mouth. Her voice was hoarse and painfully dry. I'm not compatible with him. Not compatible. The words seemed to ignite her mother completely. Her voice turned shrill and piercing. Why didn't you say that before the wedding? Why didn't you say it before you got the marriage certificate? Now that we've become the laughingstock of the whole city, you tell me you're not compatible. She shook Willow's arm hard, as if trying to shake her awake. Are you still thinking about that student with the last name Ito? That Makoto? The moment the name Makoto was spoken, Willow's body stiffened violently. It was as if a jolt of icy electricity had struck her in an instant. That name from her past life, the men who had clung to her like a malignant parasite, who had deceived her and dragged her into hell. Mom, what nonsense are you talking about? Willow's voice shot up sharply, filled with shock, fury, and terror, as if her most sensitive nerve had been touched. She flung her mother's hand away and staggered back a step, her face white as paper. She bit her lip hard. What does this have to do with him? Her mother frowned. Nonsense. Startled by her daughter's intense reaction, Willow's mother instead became even more convinced of her own suspicions. A look mixing heartbreak and disappointment appeared on her face. Willow, I gave birth to you. Who do you think you're fooling? Do you think I didn't know that back then, before Makoto went abroad, you locked yourself in your room for days without eating or drinking? After he left, then you agreed to marry George. And now, the moment you're divorced, are you planning to go to Country M to look for him? Are you? Justin also stubbed out his cigarette heavily and spoke in a low voice, carrying the authority of the head of the household. Willow Lu, you're being far too childish. What kind of person is Makoto? Just an ordinary student. What can he give you? What can he bring to the Lu family? This marriage with the Wang family is something countless people beg for and still can't get. And you, just like that, you say divorce and it's done. Do you have any regard left for this family? For your mother and me? It's not like that. I didn't. Willow shook her head frantically, feeling utterly unable to defend herself. The overwhelming grievance and the fear accumulated from her past life made her whole body tremble. I have nothing to do with him anymore. I've long since cut ties with him, she said. What would I go to Country M to find him for? I hate him. I hate him so much I wish he. The vicious curse that followed was swallowed back forcefully, leaving only her ragged, hurried breathing. Hate him. Willow's mother clearly didn't believe her. She let out a cold laugh. If you hated him, would you have acted like that back then? If you hated him, would you be throwing away such a good husband like George because of him now? I think you've completely lost your mind. She pointed straight at Willow, her tone firm and unyielding. I'm telling you this, Willow, this divorce cannot just end like this. You must go and apologize to George. Go and beg him to come back, no matter what method you use. Otherwise, don't you dare call me your mother. Willow looked at her parents, their fierce expressions, the unquestionable commands in their eyes, the coercion wrapped in the name of family. A bone-chilling cold spread from her heart to her limbs. She felt as if she had been stripped naked and thrown into an icy wasteland, enduring the sharpest blades wielded by the people closest to her. For the sake of family dignity, she had married a man she didn't love and endured 10 years of a marriage without intimacy or affection. In her previous life, for the sake of that illusory old affection, she had been deceived into going abroad, only to cause George's death and end up dying miserably on the streets herself. Reborn into this life, all she wanted was to hold on to the men she truly owed. The men she truly wanted to make amends to, yet she couldn't even get close. The sheer irony and desolation tightened around her throat like an icy hand, leaving her unable to make a sound. She looked at her parents. The light in her eyes drained away bit by bit. until nothing remained but a stagnant, lifeless despair. Fine. She heard her own voice, drifting out like a ghost's whisper. I'll go beg him. She tugged at the corner of her mouth, trying to force out a smile, but it looked worse than crying. The last shred of strength seemed to be completely drained from her body. She didn't look at her parents again. Like a wandering soul, she dragged her heavy steps toward the stairs, one step at a time, heading upstairs to that cold room that belonged to her alone. Behind her, her mother's tearful reminders still echoed. Remember to dress properly. Be sincere. You absolutely must. Willow closed the bedroom door, cutting off all sound. She leaned her back against the cold door panel and slowly slid down to the floor. Darkness swallowed her whole. Tears poured out silently. This time, not for George, and not for that failed marriage, but for her own absurd, desperate rebirth, and for this inescapable, bone-chilling loneliness. Chapter 15. A few days later, in my office. Boss. Major breakthrough. David burst in like a gust of wind, waving a freshly printed report in his hand, his face unable to hide his excitement. "We've figured out the cause of that interface defect from last time," he said rapidly. "Just like we suspected, it's the coupled effect of inhibited oxygen vacancy migration and the lattice stress field. The match with Dr. Su's model prediction is as high as 98%. My God, this is practically a divine prediction." I took the report from him and quickly scanned the key data and analysis charts. A trace of approval flickered in my eyes. Anna's talent and intuition in materials physics modeling were indeed astonishing. This report undoubtedly provided the crucial breakthrough our team had been struggling to find for weeks. Very good. I set the report down and looked at David. "Notify the core members of the project team. Small conference room in 30 minutes. We'll discuss the next steps for validation and device optimization. Have Anna attend as well. She's the primary architect of the model." "Yes, sir." David responded energetically. Just as he turned to leave, he seemed to remember something. His expression grew a little strange, hesitation flickering across his face. "Ah, boss. Something else?" I asked, lifting my gaze. He scratched his head and said cautiously, "I was just passing through the lobby downstairs, and I think I saw Professor Liu again." David glanced at my face, carefully gauging my reaction. But this time she wasn't standing. She was sitting on one of the lounge chairs in the corner, head lowered. She looked kind of pitiful. He paused, then couldn't help muttering softly, "This is already, what, the 4th or 5th day, boss? What exactly is she trying to do? If this keeps up, it's really not a great look." The faint warmth on my face vanished instantly, replaced by my usual cold indifference. I picked up another document from the desk, my voice perfectly flat. "How long she chooses to sit there is her freedom. The Institute's lounge chairs are for everyone. As for impact," I paused, then looked up at David, my gaze sharp. "Just do your job. Don't concern yourself with the rest." David felt a chill run through him under my stare. He nodded quickly. "Understood. I'll go notify them right away." With that, he fled the office as if escaping. My eyes returned to the document, yet the black printed words seemed to morph into Willow's pale, despairing face, sitting in the lobby lounge, like a homeless ghost. An inexplicable irritation quietly crept back in. Her persistent appearances, like a shadow I couldn't shake, kept reminding me of that failed, betrayal-filled marriage. Did she really think this would soften my heart? Annoyed, I snapped the file shut and rubbed my brow. Just then, my phone on the desk vibrated. Anna's name lit up the screen. I answered, my tone unconsciously gentler. "Hello, Anna." "Professor Wang." Anna's voice came through the line, bright and tinged with excitement. "Do you have time this afternoon? My dad says he caught a huge wild crucian carp today. He insists on making soup to show off a bit. He asked me to check if you're free tonight to come over and try it." There was anticipation in her voice, along with a faint, barely noticeable shyness. I barely hesitated. Almost immediately, I agreed. "Sure, I'll come by after the meeting this afternoon." The warm, lived-in atmosphere of the Su household held a powerful allure for me at that moment, the perfect refuge from all this irritation. "That's great." Anna's voice instantly lifted with joy. "Then I'll tell my dad. He'll add more tofu. Drive safely." After hanging up the phone, my mood inexplicably felt a little lighter. I stood up, preparing to head to the small conference room. As I passed by the window, my gaze drifted downward almost unconsciously. In front of the Institute's main building, the wide plaza was bathed in harsh afternoon sunlight. At a single glance, I saw that familiar figure sitting on a lounge chair in the corner. Willow was dressed in a plain, light-colored dress. Her back was slightly hunched, her head lowered, long hair falling to hide the side of her face. She looked like a statue frozen in time, sitting utterly still, in stark, almost painful, contrast to the brisk, energetic flow of researchers moving all around her. The sunlight fell on her, yet it seemed only to outline a lonely, cold silhouette. My gaze lingered on her for less than a second before I indifferently looked away. Without the slightest pause, I picked up the folder on my desk and strode out of the office. The noise downstairs had nothing to do with me, and the person downstairs had nothing to do with my future. I had a meeting to attend, and then a place to go where I could feel warmth. Time slipped by in a strange kind of stalemate. Willow's waiting became a sight that drew attention at first, then slowly faded into numb familiarity within the institute. She no longer tried to approach me day after day. She simply appeared on that same corner lounge chair, like a plant forgotten in the shadows, gradually withering away. I, on the other hand, completely blocked out her existence, pouring all my energy into my work and into my steadily warming relationship with Anna. Anna's intelligence, her brightness, and her undisguised admiration were like a beam of sunlight, slowly melting the ice deep in my heart. And the Sioux household's dinners, so full of everyday warmth, became the most comforting harbor in my exhausting life. The day the divorce cooling-off period ended arrived quietly. I didn't show up. Attorney Chan handled everything on my behalf and delivered the 2 brand-new divorce certificates into Willow's hands. When that cold, rigid texture fell into her palms, Willow merely glanced at it numbly, then stuffed it into her bag. There was no expression on her face, as if it were nothing more than an irrelevant document. That afternoon, after receiving the divorce certificate, she did not go back to the institute. When I learned that the procedures had been completed, I was in the middle of discussing an experimental plan with Anna. I simply gave a calm as if setting down an unimportant burden, and then returned my full attention to the diagrams in front of me. Life seemed, at last, to have completely shaken off Willow's shadow and returned to the path I had wanted all along. Chapter 16. Until 1 week later, on a dull, heavy evening, Willow wandered alone along the riverside path by the city's moat, walking without any real destination. The early summer wind carried a faint, damp scent from the water, ruffling her disheveled hair. After the divorce, she had moved out of the marital home filled with too many cold memories and rented a cramped, shabby studio near the university. Her parents' scolding and coercion had temporarily stopped. Perhaps they had finally given up on her completely. The world seemed to fall suddenly silent, leaving behind nothing but boundless emptiness and confusion. She didn't know where her future lay, nor what she could still do. The only gift Rebirth had given her seemed to be this bone-deep regret and pain with nowhere to go. The image of George walking side by side with Anna was like a poisoned thorn, stabbing her heart day and night. Just then, a hoarse male voice, strangely familiar yet utterly alien, sounded from not far behind her. Professor Liu. Willow Liu's steps halted abruptly. In that instant, it felt as if all the blood in her body flowed backward. A freezing chill shot up from the soles of her feet and spread through her entire body. That voice carved into the deepest part of her soul, the voice of a living nightmare. She turned around, stiffly, painfully slowly. The fading sunset dyed the river's surface in shattered shades of gold and crimson. A few steps away stood a man. He wore a cheap suit that was obviously ill-fitting and even a little dirty. His hair was greasy and unkempt, his complexion an unhealthy sallow yellow. His eye sockets were sunken, cheekbones sharp, lips cracked and peeling. Only his eyes, the moment she turned around, they burst into a nearly greedy, pathological gleam, locking onto her as if she were prey. Even with his haggard face and hunched figure, Willow recognized him instantly. Makoto, the man who, in her previous life, had lured her abroad and pushed her into the depths of hell. The man she had once genuinely loved, and ultimately hated to the core. How was he here? How had he found her? Overwhelming terror crashed over Willow like an icy tide. She instinctively stumbled back a step, every hair on her body standing on end. Memories from the filthy rental apartment in Country M flooded back, the choking stench, the beast-like roars when his addiction flared, the cold blade pressed to her throat, the endless threats and demands for money. The images poured in like a breached dam, slamming violently into her nerves. She almost screamed, "Professor Liu, it really is you." Makoto grinned. His smile twisted and distorted. He strode forward, reaching out to grab Willow's arm. "This is great. I finally found you. I knew it. I knew you still had me in your heart. Don't touch me." Willow reacted as if struck by a venomous snake. She flung his hand away and shrieked. Her voice, warped by extreme fear, cut sharply through the quiet riverside. She staggered backward again and again, her face white as paper, her body shaking uncontrollably. "Get away from me. Stay away from me." Makoto was momentarily stunned by her violent reaction. Then the smile drained from his face, replaced by an expression mixing hurt and something dark and sinister. "Professor Liu, what's wrong with you?" he said. "It's me, Makoto. Didn't you used to like me the most?" He took another step closer, his eyes turning obsessive and unhinged. "I'm back. I came back to find you. Let's get married, just like you promised back then. We'll go abroad, get married, and live a good life." "You're insane." Chapter 17. Looking at the gaunt, wild-eyed man in front of her, Willow felt a chill shoot straight from her heart to the top of her head. This familiar obsession and madness. It was exactly the same as in her previous life. "I don't even know you," she shouted. "Get away from me, or I'm calling the police." Her hands shook as she fumbled for the phone in her pocket. The police. Makoto seemed to hear something utterly ridiculous. He suddenly burst into hysterical laughter, his voice hoarse and grating. The laughter cut off abruptly. His expression turned viciously cold as he stared at Willow. From the inner pocket of his filthy suit jacket, he slowly pulled out an old, palm-sized black voice recorder. "Professor Liu," he said, "don't you remember this?" He pressed the play button, a cruel, triumphant smile spreading across his face. After a brief crackle of static, a young woman's voice came clearly from the recorder, unmistakably Willow's, trembling, slurred with alcohol, breaking apart between sobs. "Makoto, don't go. Okay, I like you, really. I can get divorced, we can get married, go abroad, anywhere is fine, as long as I'm with you." It was her voice. From back then, on the night Makoto had graduated from his master's program and was about to go abroad. After a group dinner, she had gotten drunk, cornered him in the lab, and in an emotional collapse said those words, the words that had planted every seed of disaster. Willow felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She froze completely, rooted to the spot. It was as if all the blood in her body had solidified. She stared in disbelief at the small black recorder in Makoto's hand, listening to her own pathetic, foolish confession echo out of it. An overwhelming wave of shame and terror clamped around her throat like two massive hands. He had recorded it. He had kept it all this time. This demon. "Did you hear that, Professor Liu?" Makoto switched off the recorder. His face was twisted with a feral, victorious grin, his gaze sharp and poisonous like a barbed hook. "You said it yourself. You wanted to marry me. You wanted to go abroad with me. Now I'm back. I've come to collect on your promise." He stepped closer, his greedy eyes raking over Willow's bloodless face, pale with terror. "Sign it and come with me." With his other hand, he pulled out a crumpled, obviously hastily printed document. At the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Marriage agreement." No way. Willow shook her head violently. Her voice shattered under the weight of terror. "That was drunk talk. It doesn't count. I'd rather die than go with you. Don't even think about it." She turned to run. "You don't get to choose." Makoto lunged forward and grabbed her arm, his grip brutally strong. His eyes turned savage in an instant. He lowered his voice, hissing like a venomous snake, thick with threat and madness. "You won't sign? Fine. Then I'll send this recording and every little detail of how you cared for me, your student, to your university, to every one of your colleagues, to Professor Wang, and," his smile twisted into something utterly vile, "to the media. Let everyone see how the pure, spotless Professor Liu seduced her own student behind closed doors." "No, don't." It was as if all strength had been ripped from Willow's body. Her eyes flew open in pure horror. Fear seized her completely. Her academic reputation was her life. If that recording were exposed, she couldn't even imagine the devastation. And George, he already hated her so deeply. If he heard this too, Willow's vision swam. Darkness crept in at the edges. She almost fainted. "Sign it," Makoto ordered. He shoved the crumpled marriage agreement and a cheap ballpoint pen into Willow's trembling hand. His eyes burned with obsession and madness. "Sign it and come with me. Help me get through this. I promise I'll listen to you from now on. We'll live properly together." His tone softened, coaxing and false, but the greed and desperation in his eyes were impossible to hide. Willow's hand shook so violently she could barely hold the pen. She looked at the men in front of her, like a living demon. She looked at the document in her hand, like a contract selling her soul. And then she thought of the research institute lobby, George's cold, retreating back, and the harmonious sight of him walking beside Anna. Overwhelming despair crashed over her like an icy tide, swallowing her whole. Chapter 18. The river wind wailed softly as it swept past, carrying the faint warmth of early summer, yet it could not dispel the bone-deep chill clinging to Willow. She clutched the cheap ballpoint pen, her fingertips icy, trembling like leaves in the wind. Before her was Makoto's sallow, twisted face, filled with greed and madness. In her ears hissed his venomous threats. Behind her lay the cold, silent river, as if quietly beckoning. Sign. Bind herself once again to this train bound for hell, repeating the tragedy of her past life. Not sign. Lose everything, her reputation in ruins. Nailed forever to the pillar of shame, losing even the last shred of the right to exist humbly in George's presence. Either path led straight into an abyss. Rebirth had not brought her any chance at life. Instead, it had forced her to taste this despair more clearly, more soberly. Her gaze fell on the small black recorder in Makoto's hand. That was it. The thing that had recorded her most foolish, most shameful drunken words, now a blade hanging over her head. And also the most irrefutable proof, in George's eyes, that her heart had always housed another man. Yes, George had been right. Psychological cleanliness. Her heart had indeed once belonged to someone else, even if it was long past. Even if that feeling had already turned to ashes amid betrayal and harm, the stain remained, like a blot on white paper, impossible to erase completely. That stain existed not only in George's eyes, but in Makoto's threats, and in a past she herself could no longer face. Sign it. Makoto growled impatiently and shoved her hard. Willow stumbled back, her spine slamming into the cold metal railing along the riverbank. Pain tore a muffled groan from her throat. Just then, a crisp ringtone rang out abruptly, shattering the suffocating stalemate. It was the phone in Willow's bag. Makoto's eyes sharpened instantly as he stared at her bag. Who is it? Willow was jolted awake by the sound. As if grasping at her final, illusory strand of hope, she fumbled frantically with the zipper and pulled out her phone. An unsaved local number flashed on the screen. Her hands shaking, almost by instinct, she pressed the answer button and raised the phone to her ear. Her voice was hoarse and broken. Hello. On the other end came a young woman's voice, bright, lively, even tinged with excitement, clear as birdsong in the forest, utterly out of place amid the bleak despair by the river. Hello. Is this Professor Willow Liu? Hi, I'm Anna, George's fiancée. Willow's fingers tightened violently around the phone, her knuckles turning white, as if she might crush the small device. Anna's voice echoed in her ears, clear, confident, triumphant, like a thin needle piercing straight into her most fragile nerve. George's fiancée. Fiancé. The word exploded like thunder in her already crumbling world. So, they had already come this far, while she was still trapped in the mire of the past, struggling desperately, clinging to her last scrap of hope. George had already moved on without hesitation, chosen someone else, even decided on a lifetime. Overwhelming despair and jealousy coiled around her heart like poisonous snakes, squeezing until she could barely breathe. She looked at Makoto's greedy, twisted face before her, then thought of Anna's bright, happy tone on the phone, and finally of the rare gentleness in George's eyes when he looked at Anna. All her persistence, all her struggle, seemed laughable, pathetic. Sign it. What are you waiting for? Makoto urged impatiently, the threat in his voice growing heavier. He had already begun glancing around nervously, as if afraid someone might notice. Willow stared at the crumpled marriage agreement in her hand. The crooked, cheap-looking print mirrored the hell she was about to step into, one called marriage. The miserable death of her past life and the despair of this one flashed before her eyes like a spinning lantern. She had lost, completely, lost to her own past, lost to Makoto's vile cruelty, and lost to George's resolute turning away. Tears slid down silently, dripping onto the paper, smudging the ink. Her hand trembling, she used the last of her strength to sign her name in the space marked Party B. Willow. That single word seemed to drain every last trace of life from her. When Makoto saw the signature, a look of wild ecstasy burst across his face. He snatched the agreement, carefully folded it, and tucked it into his jacket as if it were a priceless treasure. I knew it. Willow. I knew you still loved me. He babbled incoherently, the madness and greed in his eyes threatening to spill over. We'll leave right now. Get out of here. Go somewhere no one knows us. Willow was like a puppet whose soul had been torn away. She let Makoto grab her arm, stumbling along as he dragged her toward a dim alley in the distance. The wind along the moat continued to blow, carrying the faint coolness of the water, but it could no longer disperse the thick, suffocating aura of despair that clung to her. Her gaze drifted instinctively toward the glittering lights of the city center, where perhaps a loving couple was sweetly planning their future. As for her future, only endless darkness, and the abyss that awaited. Chapter 19. Anna and I scheduled our wedding for a sun-drenched weekend. There was no extravagance, no ostentatious display, only warmth and sincerity in every detail. The ceremony was held in the small courtyard of Professor Charles's old Western-style house, its brick walls covered in climbing vines. The pomegranate trees in the yard were heavy with fruit like red lanterns, and the sweet fragrance of gardenias drifted through the air. I wore a crisp white suit, my posture straight, a gentle, deeply content smile on my face, one I had never worn before. Anna was dressed in a pure white wedding gown, her veil falling softly, revealing a radiant, beautiful face. Her amber eyes were filled with happiness as she clung tightly to my arm, as if she were holding the entire world. Professor Charles watched us with a grin he couldn't suppress, discreetly wiping at the corners of his eyes from time to time. Colleagues from the institute, along with friends and family from both my side and the Sue family, gathered together, offering heartfelt blessings. David, serving as bestman, bustled about tirelessly. Seeing the genuine smile on my face, he felt truly happy for me. And then, at the edge of the crowd, in an inconspicuous corner, stood a thin, solitary figure. It was Willow. She wore a set of old clothes, faded from countless washes. Her hair was loosely tied back, her face marked by unmistakable exhaustion, deep dark circles under her eyes. She didn't know how she had mustered the courage to come. Perhaps she wanted a final farewell. Perhaps she simply wanted one last look at the men she had once possessed, only to push away with her own hands, to see what his happiness looked like now. Her gaze was fixed tightly on Anna and me. She watched as I carefully lifted Anna's veil, as I leaned down to whisper softly in her ear, as we exchanged rings, our eyes meeting with quiet understanding. Each scene was like a blunt blade, sawing again and again at her heart. She remembered our own wedding day, the same red decorations, the same circle of relatives and friends, and in my eyes back then, there had once been expectation, perhaps even a trace of tenderness she had chosen to ignore. If only that night she hadn't said those cold words about not sharing a bed. If only she had been willing to let go of the past, to try to accept me, to love me. Would she be the one standing beside me today? Would she have had the chance to hold such simple, genuine happiness? But there were no if-onlys. Her life had long since diverged onto a completely different path, shaped by one wrong choice after another. Makoto's debts were a bottomless pit, dragging her ever deeper into the abyss. Debt collectors haunted her like shadows, harassing her day and night. She lived like a stray dog, constantly hiding, never knowing peace. And Makoto, the source of it all, had long since revealed his selfish, despicable nature. Not only did he feel no guilt, he intensified his exploitation of her, dumping all the pressure onto her shoulders. Whatever faint affection she had once imagined, if it had ever existed at all, had been utterly crushed by reality, leaving behind nothing but boundless regret and revulsion. "George, I love you." On the stage, Anna's voice rang out, shy, yet unwavering. I lowered my head and looked at her deeply, my eyes so gentle they might melt, and replied in a clear, solemn voice, "Anna, I love you." Simple words, yet carrying immense weight. Warm applause and blessings erupted around us. I leaned down and softly kissed Anna's lips. The sunlight was perfect. The breeze was gentle. Everything was as beautiful as a fairy tale. Willow stood in the shadows of the crowd, watching us. Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to say something. "I'm sorry. I regret it. I once had a chance too." In the end, she swallowed every word back down, leaving only a sharp, searing pain in her throat. Anything she could say now would be meaningless. She lowered her head slightly, avoiding the blinding glow of happiness, turned around, and quietly slipped out of the crowd, like a ghost that had never truly appeared, disappearing around the corner of the street. Her figure was thin and lonely, quickly swallowed up by the noisy tide of people. Chapter 20. Several years later, Anna and I lived in a home that was warm and full of everyday life. In the living room, our daughter, still babbling in baby talk, sat on the padded floor, playing with building blocks. Anna sat beside her gently, smiling as she occasionally steadied a tower that was about to collapse. I came back from outside, a bag of freshly bought fruit in my hand. Anna looked up and smiled softly. "You're back." I walked over and pressed a light kiss to her forehead. "Was our daughter well behaved today?" Anna laughed. "Very well behaved, just missed you a bit." Hearing my voice, our daughter babbled excitedly and stretched out her little arms, asking to be picked up. Smiling, I lifted her into my arms and kissed her soft, chubby cheek, making the little one giggle. The scene of our family together was warm and peaceful. That evening, our neighbor Auntie Lynn stopped by with some vegetables she had grown herself. While chatting casually, she mentioned something offhandedly. "Oh right, George. Anna, do you remember that woman surnamed Lou who used to live nearby? I think she was a university professor." Anna and I exchanged a glance, both a little surprised. The name Willow had not appeared in our lives for a very long time. Anna replied gently, "I vaguely remember her. Didn't she move away later?" "That's right, she did." Auntie Lynn sighed, a trace of emotion in her voice. "I heard from a distant relative that she later went abroad with that man, but they ended up buried in debt. Supposedly creditors were chasing them constantly. She had to work non-stop to pay it back, exhausted to death, yet the debt just kept snowballing." Auntie Lynn shook her head, her face filled with pity. "In the end, I heard she really couldn't take it anymore and had a huge fight with that man. Somehow, the two of them actually died together. Ah, what a tragedy." The hand holding my daughter paused slightly. A flicker of complicated emotion passed through my eyes, but it quickly settled back into calm. Anna gently squeezed my hand, giving me a reassuring look. "Life is unpredictable," I said lightly, asking nothing more. After a bit more small talk, Auntie Lynn left. The house returned to its quiet warmth, filled only with our daughter's occasional babbling and the birdsong drifting in from outside the window. I looked down at the innocent smile on my daughter's face, then at Anna beside me, her expression gentle and serene. My heart felt clear and at peace. The past felt like a faded old photograph, its details long blurred. Those pains and resentments had already been completely soothed by the happiness and warmth before me. I was deeply grateful that, after being given a second life, I had made the right choice, that I had held on to the happiness that truly belonged to me. As for Willow's story, it ultimately became nothing more than a sigh in someone else's casual conversation. drifting away with the wind.